we curl to get stronger at chin-ups. Now that I've got your attention, hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about mindset, philosophy, the whole concept of strength training, because this is something that gets lost on a lot of people. You get a lot of people out there who pursue hypertrophy, for example, for various ends, but they're oftentimes fleeting, meaning the guys, what I've found is that guys who chase aesthetics and things like that purely for the sake of aesthetics, or that is their primary goal, they quite honestly, in my experience, struggle with hard training. They struggle with consistency, and they struggle with being able to go the distance long term and to maintain their motivation. The problem with that is that that's a very subjective thing, how you look. Well, here's the reality. Most of your quote-unquote aesthetics is genetic. A very large degree of it is. And certain things may prevent you from ever having the look that you want, no matter how effectively you train, what you put into your body, everything else, because we can't change things like base structure. And instead, I promote strength training, performance, and realistically, that is a not only a more masculine attitude, and I think that the art of manliness and masculinity is something that we as a society have started to lose to a great degree, and it's something that bothers me as a man who's now in my 40s. Something that bothers me with the next generation. But that's not really going to be the full context of this. The whole point here realistically is about motivation and going the distance, because we know that weight training is one of the best things that you can possibly do for your health, longevity, for your overall usefulness as a person. In other words, stronger people are generally more useful. Stronger people are harder to kill. Okay, and that doesn't just mean physically, that means through accidents, injuries, cancer, heart disease, everything else. We've got pretty overwhelming amounts of data on this at this point. So let's come over and let's talk about that. And this, I'm actually going to be benching and doing accessory work and tricep work and stuff for my bench press all through this, instead of chin-ups and curls, because the whole concept is going to be the same here. So what do I mean we curl? We curl to get a stronger chin-up. Why? Because that's an objective metric. Okay? Measuring your bicep is something that is so inconsistent that you could measure your bicep 4 times in the same week and get a 1/4 inch different reading every single time. Okay? Your bicep can measure anywhere between 15 and 16 inches with a completely different measurement depending on how you measure it, how much pump you have, how much you've had to eat. How your bicep looks to you is going to be very subjective, and it's going to change day to day. Okay? Because it's going to be how you perceive it. Numbers and strength is something that we can quantify. Either you can do 10 reps on a chin-up with a 45-pound plate hanging around your waist, or you can't. You can either complete it or you can't. You can either do a 1-rep max with it, or the full range of motion with 120 pounds hanging around your waist, or you can't. Right? And it's something you can track over time. You can see tangible, verifiable progress. Well, we know the biceps get used quite heavily in the chin-up. And when you start thinking in terms of strength training, and you start thinking in terms of performance, how do you view the curl? Well, the curl is there to make your biceps stronger. Well, how does it make it stronger? It makes it stronger by getting it bigger. All right? Evidence for that is pretty overwhelming at this point, that for any given individual, your strength potential of any given muscle will scale to its size. Doesn't mean that your friend is going to have the exact same bicep strength that you do at the same size of measurement, right? It's not what we're saying. We're saying for any given individual, your strength potential will scale with size. And for a single joint It will scale almost entirely with size. It only gets more nuanced when we get into big multi-joint exercises in which intramuscular coordination and things matter, in which weak points can make a big difference. Like a weak muscle somewhere could totally destroy your bar path or your kinetic chain or your groove. So that's a different animal. But when you're talking about purely the bicep, it's going to scale based upon how big you get it and how big you get it through growth, not what you inject in it, bodybuilders. So again, a little pro tip for those, well, how come this guy has this really big muscle and it's not as strong? It's like, well, I don't know. What is he injecting in that muscle? Maybe it's not all muscle. Like if he's a bodybuilder, there's a pretty overwhelmingly high possibility that he is injecting something in his bicep. Most bodybuilders do. And that includes natural bodybuilders. A lot of them still use side enhancement. But generally speaking, it's going to equal strength potential. Well, the bicep gets used very heavily in a chin-up. The bicep gets used to its full range of motion. It has extremely high activation on EMG in the chin-up, and it can become the limiting factor in a chin-up. But here's the thing to remember. Even if a muscle isn't always the weak link, if it's a primary mover, if any of the primary movers get stronger on a big exercise, what happens? You get stronger on that exercise. You just take the other muscles along for the ride. Now, the weakest link will give you the most contribution, right? The weakest link will give you the most contribution, but any size increase and strength increase of a muscle will generally increase performance potential there. Well, how would we look at something like a chin-up? Well, we know that oftentimes biceps can handle a little more total training volume than lats can. Also, our lats are getting heavily worked on a lot of other movements, aren't they? If we're doing full strength training, our lats are getting a lot of work on our deadlifts. They're getting a lot of work even on our squats and benching because of all the scapular retraction. We're fatiguing our lats a lot in strength training. So you're dealing with a situation to where if a person really wants to get their chin up, and I'm just using that as one example. Talk about triceps and the bench press, but I have plenty of videos on that, even though that's what I'm demonstrating in the background. But let's talk about the chin up with that. Well, our lats get worked quite a bit. They get pretty fatigued through all of our training. And if we know that oftentimes the biceps have a slightly higher maximum recoverable volume in many people and in most people than the lats do, well, it might make sense to do some bicep work if you want to get your chin up stronger. Why? Because your lats could have reached their pretty much training volume limit of what they're going to adapt to for the week, right? They probably reached their limit. And then also sometimes with chin-ups, putting too much volume of chin-ups can put extra tension on the connective tissue and everything because of the amount of weight involved. And at a certain point, it makes sense to say, well, you know what? If the bicep is a primary mover and I can do some extra sets for my biceps every week and they will still adapt to it, but my lats have pretty much reached their maximum effective volume for the week because of all the other stuff I'm doing, maybe it would be a good idea to do some curls to improve my chin up. But that's a different mindset, isn't it? That's a different mindset to saying, oh, I'm going to do curls just to get big arms. Well, again, big is very subjective, isn't it? Very subjective. But saying I'm going to do curls because I want to get stronger at the chin up, which is going to make my whole upper body bigger. It's going to make me more jacked, more effective. It's a completely different mentality. It's looking at these smaller exercises and saying, I'm going to use this to increase my performance in a tangible, measurable, objective manner. Because if my chin up goes up, I'll know and I can measure it. If your arms are growing, you may not always be able to notice it. Okay, because you're dealing with a small muscle, and in the tape measure, the margin of error is pretty high. And how it looks in the mirror to you is going to change depending on how you feel about yourself that week. But the chin up is a number, right? You know how many reps you can get with a 45-pound plate hanging. If you go from 5 reps to 7 reps, you know you got stronger. If you go from 10 reps to 12 reps, you know you got stronger. It's measurable, it's quantifiable. Then at that point, our bicep training becomes something that we can tangibly measure and we can quantify in our performance. It's just a different mindset. And it's a mindset that will carry you a lot longer in your training. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.